Welcome, folks, to the 24th of April, 2024. Oh, that's like some sort of palindrome. If you ignore the, no, or maybe not. Anyway, there's lots of twos and fours. Uh, this is last week we had IW, so we didn't have a meeting. So it's the first meeting in 2 weeks. This is the Hyperledger call, so the antitrust policy and the code of conduct are in effect. Links in the agenda. Link to the agenda can be found in the chat or in the Hyperledger wiki. And welcome. You're welcome to add yourself to the attendees list, make any other changes that are useful. We still don't have the live edit feature back, so but any changes you make will show up at, like after the meeting, and so links and other useful things are appreciated. Um, Anyone new today that wants to introduce themselves? Yeah, I recognize everybody. Good job, us, for coming back. Um, Announcements. We had IW on the list, but now that's happened. Any other announcements? It should be on the list. All right. Release status and work updates. Stephen, I got this note from Daniel,
Yeah,
and so I kind of
good.
dropped that in there.
Yeah, I'd asked him to, I did want
Oh,
that raised to this
Daniel's
broader community.
here. We
Daniel's
bantered long
here.
enough that
Look at
Daniel
him.
made it. So awesome. Anyway, release status and work updates. Who's got one?
I guess
So
that's my cue.
I
that
guess.
is.
Okay, sorry. Um, yes, let's see. So we wanted to announce to the community that Akapai has officially deprecated the connection protocol, issue credential v1, and present proof v1, along with receiving messages prefixed with the old DIDSOV doc URI for the message types.
That's still
Deprecation means
supported?
Yeah,
Wow.
I know. Deprecation means that the support is still present today. So in Akapai 0.12.0, you can still use the connections protocol, issue credential, present proof v1s. And we haven't officially scheduled their removal yet at this point, but we intend to do that in the future. So if for anybody that is continuing to use any of those protocols or features, strongly recommend that you get your ecosystem updated. Speak with anybody you need to help get the apps that you interact with updated to the newer versions of the protocols. If there's anything that we can do as the Akapai community to help ease that transition as well, I think we're open to hearing your thoughts. We do have some plans to move these protocols to plugins after they've been removed from the official Akapai releases. So if you desperately need these protocols still, even after the support has ended officially, you still have a path forward there for a period of time. I'm not sure how actively those plugins will be updated, but if there's sufficient community interest, we'll continue to merge PRs on them, I'm sure. But yeah, that's what's going on with Akapai and protocol deprecations.
Patrick, does your question relate to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if it's a reasonable assumption to say they'll be removed in the 1.0 release.
I think we will not remove them
Okay.
in the 1.0 release, just because we anticipate the 1.0 release to be the next major release of Akapai.
Yes.
And we only just deprecated these protocols in this past release, 0.12.0. So just to give a little bit wider, a little bit more notice, I think we'll probably wait for a release after 1.0.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, people can still use 0.12, but
True.
Stephen.
So yeah, two more follow-ons to that. We are actively, thanks to Daniel's work, removing the Indie SDK support. So it was deprecated several releases ago. And so we're now actively removing that. And the next minor or major release of Akapai will not include Indie SDK support. We are planning on putting out a 0.12.1 patch release in the very near future to deal with a couple of very edge cases that were discovered after release. So we're just cleaning up a bit of the out-of-band stuff a little bit more. So 0.12.1 is going to be coming out shortly. And then, as stated, we expect the next release to be the 1.0 release. So the plan is to start tagging and building to that, and there won't be a 13, but we'll see.
Cool. Other updates.
Just a friendly reminder, anyone using the Indicio testnet, the Indicio testnet will be reset on Tuesday, May 7th at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. We encourage you, if you're running demos, to move your demos to our demo net.
Thank you. I stuck that in announcements because that feels relevant. Other updates. Okay, there's a couple things to the agenda. I wanted to quickly talk about IEW recap. There was Aries itself was not a huge point of discussion, but I wanted to. But there's lots of sort of peripheral things that happened that I want to make sure were discussed and reviewed after that. And then a quick discovery. This came up at the very end last time. The message pickup delivered during live mode mediation, and in that discussion there's a PR over on didcom.org for that. And that would be worth discussing. I didn't have time to get it linked. Also, removing into the SDK from Acapie is a time, and the answer is yes from the previous announcements. So I'm just going to kill this item from the discussion unless there's anything relevant to discuss about it. And then I want to talk about unqualified dids. Where are we in the process? Are we close enough that we can actually set dates for kind of getting all the way there for the transition? And then and that's there. James asked in the chat, should we transition the stage of the out of band transition for 96, and that's a good piece for discussion too. Other changes to the agenda that we want to make: inclusions, removals, rearrangements. Patrick.
If there's time left, I'd be open to discuss the W3C data integrity attachments. It's RFC 0809 that is proposed, and I'd like to discuss some of the concepts.
That's a great topic. I think we'll probably get there, which is good. Cool. Okay, IW recap. I'll offer the DIDCOM OpenID topic. This was the ID union work that showed how to put that together. There's an additional small DIDCOM protocol that used to pass an access token and then link to the OpenID and a DIDCOM connection together. That was well received. And lots of folks in there, including Niels from Spherion, who's involved, of course, in the OpenID Spherion libraries that are widely used. And so there was lots of understanding and agreement there about the excellent work done by the folks in ID Union. I was just the messenger in that case. So that went over well. And including getting a nod from Torsten. He didn't make the meeting, but wanted to see it, so I presented to him after that the next day. So that went well. Colton, any report on the DIDCOM session and demos?
So I think the DIDCOM session itself went pretty well. Had a lot of people there. People were asking questions, and sort of we came out of that meeting with, DIDCOM is, some people were thinking DIDCOM was this big old complicated thing, but it wasn't as complicated as some people thought. And then as far as the demos go, other tables had a lot more people visiting them. but the people that we did have stop by, I think we had about like 7 or 8 people stop by the DidCom table for the demo. They all seemed actively engaged and really interested in what was actually going on. So that was really good.
It was a great demo.
Yeah, that included a DIDCOM library running on a Raspberry Pi in an IoT device scenario that hooked up with the DIDCOM demo. So it's
I,
really cool.
I will want to add on top of that. So with the Internet of Things and DidCom, one of the people who did stop by was Ken Watanabe, who won second place in the Diff Hackathon, a recent Diff Hackathon, where they were effectively they weren't using DidCom, but they were using verifiable credentials on a Raspberry Pi. He stopped by. He thought it was very interesting, and we are now exchanging emails back and forth. And I'm excited to see what both he's doing, what we've been doing, and what the Australia folks are doing, what we can all come together with in the end. It's exciting.
You name dropped the Australian folks. Steve, I don't know if you wanted to give a quick intro to that since you're here.
Yes. Recently, Anatomy Labs, we put together a working relationship with some students at the Queensland University of Technology down in Brisbane. And they are in the major where Internet of Things is their key emphasis in that part of computer science. And so they'll be working on bringing DidCom into the the Home Assistant software platform on the Raspberry Pi. And so they'll be working all year. We will have a presentation at the next IIW that we will make to kind of show and demo what they will have done at that point.
Patrick, your hand's up.
There was someone on the Discord, I think it was I forget if it was Aries or Indy, but he was also interested in running Akapai on IoT in a hospital setting to exchange medical information between devices, and it instantly made me think about this IW demo. So there's a lot of fun stuff happening with IoT. Maybe it'd be good to start some kind of group or.
There has been discussions on that in the past. We tend to let there be an overwhelming surge of interest before we really kick that off so that it starts strong. But yes, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah, and I will go ahead and mention that the DidCom stuff that I've done with the Raspberry Pi, it was much lighter weight because Akapai is like the kitchen sink. It has everything and it's supported. I wasn't running Akapai. I was running a much lighter weight library, which only communicated DidCom so that you could add other things on top. So,
because I've had I had previously run the full Akapai on a Raspberry Pi and, run like a sort of Discord bot that could issue credential to a wallet. You could request QR codes in Discord and it was all running on a Pi and it was, working pretty good. So yeah, I'd be definitely interested if there's discussions happening and, giving a hand.
Also, as a note, there's different levels of Akapai. Colton's was using a Pi Zero W, which is one of the smaller ones.
Yes, that was.
And you're also capable of running like a 3 or a 4 or something large, right? So
yeah.
And there's so anyway, then there's even a Pi 5 out now, which is newish, but even more powerful than that. So yeah. Anyway.
So just an FYI on the Queensland University of Technology team, they'll be building into the Pi 4 is what they're using.
Cool. Nice. Awesome. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to mention was I gave a a session on the DIDS as an identifier metasystem and the value of that. there's some interesting takeaways from there, including what EIDAS is trying to do and not necessarily trying to do with identifiers themselves. And so there's definitely some progress that can be made to increase the use of DIDs within the EIDAS-2 effort. But also I think it was a good, compelling argument about why you shouldn't consider DIDs if you hadn't before, because of the power that it gets you in moving forward and adapting to things. And so that, I think, was well received also. Stephen, can you want to give a quick overview of TDW?
Sure. BC Gov is been looking at DID Web and thinking it's not sufficient as is, and had tried to work on DID Web S and gotten a little decided that wasn't the right way to go. So we've been working with a small group on a thing called DID TDW, Trust DID Web, and that was what we presented, which is a new DID method that uses a log and allows for a web-based DID method that is verifiable, has the full history, allows portability, allows actually moving a DID, so that even though the DID itself changes, an embedded identifier allows it to, and the retained history allows it to continue on, and the association with the past part of the DID continues. So we presented that. I'll add some links there for anyone who didn't get a chance and is interested.
Thanks. Other topics that I didn't get here in this quick summary for recap that we want to discuss that happened there.
There was an interesting Apple Google demo that used the passkey protocol, not passkeys themselves, but the passkey protocol to enable a DIDComm-like channel between a wallet and a browser, so that when a browser is asked for a verifiable credential, this channel could be established with your phone, and the credential that is held on your phone passed to the browser, so it could pass it to the verifier. So it was kind of an interesting, both in that it was a combined demo between iOS, Android, Safari, and Chrome. So it covered all the bases of the different messages. It used passkey in the passkey protocol, the underlying passkey protocol, without using passkey, and then verifiable credentials. Apple was also asked a super interesting question, which was, will you allow other than the Apple Wallet on a phone? And the Apple representative demoing said, oh, I'm just a tech person, I can't comment on things like that. But he did point to a Apple public statement on it that basically said, yes, they would allow searching for credentials in other wallets. And in thinking about it afterwards, I'm kind of thinking what that means is that other apps, there'd be a way to query other apps to see if there's credentials that could satisfy a request, which is, again, an interesting thing, because it would allow mobile apps to have credentials. So essentially everyone would have, every app might have its own wallet per se that held credentials, and it could be queried across. So anyway, interesting session, interesting use of passkeys, and interesting messaging from Apple on that.
So they've been notoriously, Apple has been notoriously opinionated about things, including, for example, ISO MDL, MDocs, being the way that they're interested in doing it, and there was some progress made in the fact that that their role should be in facilitating communication and then the actual credential format could be maybe something different depending on the use case, which is cool.
Yeah, they made it very clear that once that messaging channel was established, they were not prescriptive on what was being passed. They did a demo, but they weren't saying, here's, it's using this protocol in this format between it. It was just a messaging channel.
Yeah.
And so to be determined is how it gets used.
Patrick, your hands up.
Yeah, just something to add. I don't know if it was specific to this demo or if it's the concept in general, but there was a question about Bluetooth and proximity detection. So in the demo, both devices needed to support Bluetooth, and there was a proximity check happening. I don't know if this is because in their demo they use the MDL or if it has to do with the previous sort of device engagement process, but that was something that was raised as a potential accessibility sort of shortcoming.
I can comment on that. So the Bluetooth thing, because I attended both the Google talk and the one on passkeys, the Bluetooth thing itself is part of the passkey protocol where you're not only scanning the QR code, but the phone will send out a Bluetooth advertisement with some agreed upon payload that the computer can then read that payload via its Bluetooth identifier. It doesn't have to. They don't have to connect. It just has to see that the Bluetooth identifier is out there to know that you are somewhat near the computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was purely part of the passkey part. Yeah, Colton, you had it nailed.
Thanks for the clarification.
Colton added that link here.
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment. So part of the reason why I pasted the link in chat there, after the discussion, after their demo and everything, I got with, I believe it was Helen from the Android team and asked her about the demo, like where I could find out more, because really we, as a community, we need to be hopping on this if we can, because this just creates a unified way for, because it's baked into the operating system at this point, but it's a unified way to transfer credentials to log into websites or to do any sort of interaction with verifiable credentials and websites. And so I talked with her and she gave me that link on how to run the demo yourself. And I believe it's just with like an Android device and Google Chrome, but it's something that people can play with. And that was huge.
Yes. I think it would be cool to learn, understand, explore implications and such. I think that would be pretty powerful. Tim.
Yeah, just comment that one of the things that this would also solve is wallet selection, and that without using deep links, which are not secure. So I think that's gonna be a huge benefit as well. But one of the things to keep in mind is this is under you can see in the link, the WICG, which is an incubator for W3C web-based, browser-based specifications. So it still has to go through W3. It's going to be fast track, but it does still have to go through a full WC process. So that's to consider. The other thing is this will be part of, or seems very likely that this protocol is going to be part of the ISO 1813-7 specification as a mechanism, as an alternate, one of the mechanisms to issue credentials. So it's going to get pushed very aggressively on pretty much every for all the major technology providers.
To issue or present?
To present. 1813-7 is about web-based remote flow for ISO MDL, because right now it's only proximity.
You had said issue in there, so
Oh, did I apologize? Yeah. So no wallet
Yeah.
selection at presentation. Yes.
presentation time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you did bring up an excellent point there, because I didn't know about the incubation time here. One of the things that they did say during the demo was that effectively they kind of hack this together in with the passkey APIs to get a demo out there. They were saying that none of the stuff that we saw there was finalized, and that things were still open for discussion and contributing. And with you mentioning that it's essentially on the fast track, the sooner we hop on this, the sooner we can provide feedback, and the sooner we can have something that everybody can use more easily.
The good thing is all out in the open, so it's you can track the conversation, everything at that GitHub link.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool. Any other topics about IW? Okay, the next one was, and we have James here. James, would you mind hunting down a link for your PR? I didn't grab it in time. And there it is. Nice. Man, we need voice assistants that are responsive as James. So this here is a PR that was made. This is the pickup protocol for message pickup, and the protocol itself lacks. There's a lack of detail in the protocol that allows for two totally separate interpretations of live mode. One is that messages are simply just passed on as they are delivered. The other one is that it still uses the message flow handling of passing messages and then also confirming that they were received. And it's ambiguous in the thing. So there's been some good conversations here, which is good. There's some discussion about what the right way to handle this, in the sense that not clarifying, but what happens to the version number? Do we iterate to something else that's more specific, which is a little complicated, because technically you could call this a clarification because it clarifies something that was unclear before, but we have such wildly different implementations in the wild that perhaps engaging a version number mechanism to kind of keep track of that might be actually really handy. And so that discussion is, this PR is over on the DIDCOM group, but it's of interest here for folks doing mediation, both on the mediator side or on the consuming mediation side, that might be using these protocols. So there's some discussion actively happening here-ish. Is there anything that would be useful to bring up in the call today?
I think it's also worth noting, Sam, that this also needs to probably happen with the pickup v2 protocol in the actual Aries RCs as well. Because the only difference between v2 and v3 is v3 is specifically for DIDCOM v2.
Yes. Yes. Although it gives us more reason to move to DIDCOM v2. So, no, I acknowledge that, though, that if folks cannot move to DIDCOM v2 in the short term, this may be something to clarify there as well. This is one of those classic things where it was assumed to be different by different parties because it didn't actually specify in the spec, and then by the time we realized the thing, we now have advanced implementations of both of the assumptive options that are happening. So yes. Any other thoughts? Do we need a version bump for this? This falls in the cracks of the normal what requires a version bump, because it technically is just clarifying something that was unclear before, but it's like a massive thing that is unclear.
Kind of getting the feeling that it's going to be a little messy no matter which way we address it. Because if we stay on the same version, implementations still need updates. If we bump to a new version, implementations still need updates. If we went to a new version, we'd effectively be saying that the previous version is invalid and should not be used at all, which could come with its own set of complications if it inevitably continues to exist in the wild for a while.
Yeah, no matter what, you're still going to run into the situation where anyone using the old version may be one of the two competing implementation details until they end up both moving.
Maybe, but here's a proposal that could shorten that. The new thing that James is proposing is I think a straight over assumption that of actually what is happening in some of the code bases, right, James? So
Yeah.
what we could do is version bump it. Existing implementations would then be able to trivially bump up their version. They could basically declare that they support both, sort of go through a rapid thing where they add, let's see, what would this be, 4? They add version 4, and they can still say version 3, but on a relatively short time frame where all of the folks that have done it that way will then go to 4, and then 3 remains the one that is sent live mode, and that would differentiate between the implementations with the minimum amount of code possible. It's still not super clean, but it may be a little bit cleaner to allow those that are using the live delivery via the same flow handling protocol to sort of self-identify, and then we can move up those that are that had made the other assumption, on a slower basis since there's more code involved.
One of the other awkward things there, Sam, is we would need to do that for both. Like, do you think that we could actually, can we have the V4 version support both DIGCOM V1 and V2, or do you do a V4 and a V5 to acknowledge the differences there?
We could do a V2A. I'm only partially teasing. I'm reluctant to try and add confusion to the versioning with to support a protocol that is already on the roadmap to not be used. If we can make it support both, I'm okay with that. But we had some renaming because of the differences between keys and DIDs. And so the thing that makes me reluctant about that is that we in DIDCOM v1 it was key based, in DIDCOM v2 it's DID based, and so that makes it an awkward thing to try and make it backwards compatible.
Yeah.
Any thoughts there? I'm most interested in fixing the DIDCOM v2 implementation of this, as that's where we're going. If folks are experiencing active problems with the DIDCOM v1 version, then we could also give some attention there. But I think it's less urgent, at least in my perception, is it right now.
From my perspective, I think I've never not seen issues with mediation. So, like, I think that having given the timeline to get to DIGCOM v2, I think having a road to actually still continuing to have this be resolved and be clarified in v1, DIGCOM v1 seems like a very seems important to me. One of the thoughts, if you didn't want to do a version bump for the V2s, we could make the clarification in the V2, just update that one, do a version bump for the V3, split it.
We could. Thoughts on my proposal to like version bump the clarification and then allow those already doing it to sort of self-identify? Is that just unnecessary messiness, or is that useful? I can hear wheels turning. Any thoughts, Daniel?
I'd still kind of come back to the point of it's going to be kind of messy either way. So I'm kind of feeling like it's a bit of a wash whether we go one way or the other in terms of complexity and issues that we're going to run into.
One
Yeah.
of the things that would help reduce it is reducing the timeline of the complexity. And so I don't know what development schedules are like for various teams, but I wonder if this is something that we can try as a community to fast track the adjustments to, so that the time window of the complexity is at least short, even if it's messy.
So I vote that we do the version bump, because if you're ever debugging something, having the version bump would help clarify that they've adapted to this workflow.
That makes some good sense. It also means that when you get there, it's clear what's happening, and the only unclear thing is happening in V3. So I think, given that, James, what we should do is not accept your PR, but not because it's not good, but rather turn it into a version 4 that includes that clarification and follow up a V3 merge that highlights the difference and points to V4. And then whether folks want to sort of self-identify as 4 that are already there or not is a little bit of a separate issue. But that way, when we all get to 4, we know that this issue has been solved.
I
Does that
think
make
I
sense?
agree on that. It makes it an explicit, we have actually resolved this issue versus maybe.
Right.
I'll agree with that there as well, because like you mentioned, we can then see once we've hit 4, and it creates that explicit breaking change, and people are forced to upgrade anyways. It's such a critical piece of how DIDCOM works that it needs to happen.
Yes.
Question then is, what do you do with the V2? Should we just make the clarification in the V2 of the protocol, or
I have fewer opinions there.
we could also maybe, this is maybe wrong, but another idea there is to do a 2.1 of it, because that also gives an explicit nature, but you don't have to do another major version.
That would be maybe ideal. It's a little bit of a violation of the dot rules in that it's not really optional. But if the other thing to do is that if you want to sort of be as inclusive as possible, you would accept messages either delivered directly or messages delivered inside the flow handling, which is a little bit painful, but is a way for the version 2 that you could actually handle that without requiring necessarily the major version bump.
One thing that's actually nice there that I think Daniel pointed out is that it's asymmetric in that the holder who's actually receiving the messages doesn't actually end up caring, because they can just receive it streamed down like we did back in the earlier versions. So it's only the mediator that really needs to be updated in terms of actually sending the delivery messages.
Right.
Yeah.
So
at
in a
least
way, it could be optional.
Yeah. In our experience, at least with our mediation clients that we've written recently, implementing Pickup v3, when we receive a message over an active WebSocket that we've marked for live delivery, we just take whatever we receive and then like push it onto the inbound message processing pipeline. So regardless of whether it was a message that was forwarded and then just pushed directly down the socket, or if it was a delivery message that actually originates from the mediator, they're both going to the same place, and the processing for the delivery message will end up behaving the way it needs to anyways.
Oh, because it's gonna receive the delivery message, and so it's gonna process the message and act the receipt.
Yeah.
So it actually can handle both of them.
Yeah, without really doing anything particularly special. Yeah.
And that may be actually relatively common among implementations because of exactly what you described. Interesting. So it really is the mediator that really needs the code shift because it's just going to still work the same on the receiving side.
Yes.
That's insightful. I had something in my brain like that, but had not formed cohesive thoughts with it. And so thank you, Daniel, for pointing that out. So I don't mind I think we can get away with and explain the optional piece in the fact that if the mediator detects support of 2.1, it can then wrap it in the delivery mechanism, and that way it knows that the client's ready to receive it, even if that's common, which technically still makes it that optional thing that you wouldn't necessarily have to do. So that's not perfectly clean, James, but I think might be good enough for version 2. Any thoughts there?
I think so. I think that may be better than just making the clarification, because then we can be explicit in that these various mediators and these clients support 2.1, even though it's a yeah, I think that seems like a reasonable solution for 2.1 or V2.
Yeah, V2. So your head is in the PR. Your head, I think you may be one of the folks that understands this the clearest. Are you willing to do the PR work that we've talked about? Is that
Yeah.
something you have the bandwidth for?
Yeah, I can do that.
Cool. I appreciate that. That helps move this issue forward in a really useful way.
Yep.
The fact that you made the conversation happen with the clarity that we have, so super useful. Cool. Anything else on message pickup?
I think the only one final comment to make, and I don't know that there's really a good solution to this problem yet, is that this will increase the size of the messages being delivered to clients connected live by that 33% message bloat we get from base 64 encoding base 64 encoded data. So I think it's worth calling out at least that that's happening. I think the explicit nature that we get by doing the delivery, I think that makes it a necessary trade-off to make, but it still kind of sucks.
Yeah, I think we're at the point where the next version of DIDCOM needs to not have that issue, because we're getting to the point now where the understand we have good semantic understanding, and solving that technical bit I think would be really useful. But that's a separate thread. And I agree. I think that the explicit nature is worth the downside. And when we solve that downside, the same pattern will actually work without that bloat situation going on.
My only complaint that I kind of have about the whole situation is that aside from, like, say, network costs, depending on how implementations do it, it will potentially also affect, like, say, disk-based costs, as now you're having to make sure you store all of those messages so that they can be axed later on.
Yes, that is another consideration that I had thought of. I'd brought it up because it's a little bit implementation dependent. But if you are storing it to make sure that guarantee is assured, given the mechanism that we've just talked about, which is the benefit of it, right? Then you still have the fact that you're going to have to treat it as a stored message, which may be more expensive in some implementations. Again, though, I think that the reliability trade-off is worth that too. I mean, technically, you could just hold the thing in some sort of cheaper memory, stick it in a Redis cache or something, but then you're running the risk of an ephemeral storage system having an issue and then losing the message. So I do like being more reliable on the mediator side. Cool.
Yep.
Any other comments? Okay, unqualified DID update. We've got 8 minutes left. We have noted progress on solving the unqualified DIDs transition stuff that we've talked about. This is the adoption of DID Pure 4. and did rotate, which allows us to any existing active connections to rotate between an ephemeral did and a fully qualified one in the form of did peer 4. Are we close enough that we can actually stick expected dates on completion for this? That's my question. I don't have a link handy for this. Shoot. But I'd love to stick a, the reason I'd love to stick a date on it is that now I gotta like find the dumb thing because I don't remember the name. We may have actually merged it. And James comes through again, 793. Ooh, he did the rendered one. Pretty. Okay. So we need to update we're in step 1, which is we're updating our code bases to support did rotation and did peer 4. This is old. We're past this date. And so from a code perspective is probably the most interesting one, and we can extrapolate a goal for the deployment date there. Are we close enough that we can provide a target date for the code update on this? Akapai is probably the biggest conversation point here.
So as of 0.12.0, Akapai does support did peer 2 and did peer 4. Notably, the did peer 2 is with the updated semantics for that did method. We also support did rotate. We had to kind of make sure things were still backwards compatible with previous versions of Akapai, so it's an opt-in feature. So if you don't do anything different when you're creating invitations or accepting did exchange requests, the dids will still use the old style. But if both parties are indicating did exchange 1.1 support and you specify in the Akapai operations that trigger the exchange to complete that you want to use did peer 2 or 4, it will. So we anticipate that we'll move that to defaulting to did peer 4 at some point in the future, but I don't think we've discussed exactly when that will take place yet. So it's implemented and opt-in right now.
I think we need to get to the more than opt-in, I think, or am I wrong, before we can call that step kind of complete.
I have mixed feelings on that.
So to back up, the overall goal, of course, is to kill unqualified dids in use everywhere.
Right.
And so we've got to sort of get to the point where that's the default behavior of the software, I believe, in order to make that happen. So it might be possible to then flip a config flag so that you can opt out of it and it would go back to the original, but the default behavior would be to use the new ones. And again, step 1 is adding support so that you can do it if someone hands you one, and if you properly handle the did rotate. So step 1 might actually already be complete then, right? Because even if you said it was a flag to create them by default, but if you receive a did peer 4 and or a did rotate, it works.
Yes.
So you're already at step 1 then. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Other code bases. I know this is a little cross community at the moment, but Credo is the other piece of software kind of solidly used here. Does anyone happen to know the status of Credo?
Yeah, we have the support for both. Actually for the 3, for did peer 1, 2, and 4. By default, we are starting flows. I mean, did exchange flows by using did peer 1 at the moment. but we are going to switch to use DPIR 4 by default in the next major release in the 06.
And do you have did rotate support?
Yes.
So those are the two main code bases I'm aware of. We've had some conversations about the status of VCX and kind of where it is and where it's going. Are there any other code bases that we ought to be tracking here?
What about like the Ramo? Isn't that? I've heard that.
They're DIDCOM v2, and so they've never actually had this problem.
Right. This is for yeah.
So it's a little complicated in the fact that this assumes both did pure 4 support and did rotate as a result of that. And so we should track it anyway, even though it's a little bit less urgent. So I think just because we're trying to get to the point where we can get to did pure or DIDCOM v2, right? So I think we're actually step 1 complete, which means that the next thing that we do here is we set a target date for finishing step 2, which is we change the defaults, which it sounds like both communities are actually in the process of sort of setting that deployment goal. So the only thing that we haven't explicitly discussed is the actual like deployment date. So this is present in you said 0.12, right?
Yeah.
And so the deployment date that we need to discuss is when people can be expected to have 0.12 actually released, so that the support present in the code base is actually in production.
And Sam, you mentioned Aries VCX. Taking a look, I think I haven't been super involved there yet, but I think I know did pure 4 is supported there. I don't believe the did rotate is yet supported though.
Yes. Partially, and VCX is in a little bit of a support transition behind, for folks that are doing it because of some staffing changes, and so that one may not be able to come along at the same speed. I also don't know that there are deployments of VCX that are targeting the same kind of interoperability that the rest of us are hoping to do as a community. So that's real good. So date for step 1 deployment. It looks like largely the code is there. Any ideas, those that happen to may know about actual the production deployment of 0.12, what a target date might be for deployment? The reason that matters is that if we engage in step 2 prior to deployments actually happening, then we may encounter scenarios where one piece of the puzzle updates and defaults to did pure 4 when the other side of things, when the receiving side may not have received that update and be incompatible. It's the 24th of April now. Are we fully deployed at this point, or do we have deployments that are not yet updated to 0.12? And this may be the wrong crowd, but we probably know the people to ask. We're at time. Please take this as an action item within your organizations to figure out when a good target date for step 1 deployment can, where it can be complete. And then let's discuss this next week. So that we can stick a date on that, and then we can also update targets for step 2, which is to change the defaults. So this is good progress. I'm super happy that the code is actually there, and with a little bit of coordination, we can get to the point where we flip the defaults and then we move along from this. Any existing implementations that want to update connections can do so using did rotate, and then we have the ability to like make this happen. And so I just realized that did rotate's a didcom v1 protocol anyway, because that exists in didcom v2, which means that it's just did pure 4 support for Verimo. But so let's discuss this next week, and that way we can try to pick this. I'm going to move this discussion. Patrick, I think it was you that brought up. I'm going to move this to top of list for next week for our discussion then. Any final comments before we're done? Thanks for the call today, folks. It's super useful. I hope your week is a great one, and we will see you all later.
Thank you. Great meeting.